fun, but as of right now, most cities when I'm Canada, and I haven't understanding America have adopted citywide composting. Not all, but I didn't understand it. Kind of
Yeah, Emma, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, of course.
And so first off, I would like to ask, like, exactly how did you, I think you play guitar, right, if I'm not mistaken? So how did you kind of get into playing music, and what really drawed you about music?
Yeah, so I've been singing forever, like most kids, just like singing along in the car. My parents made the grave mistake of buying me one of those like kids' toy microphones with like a stand, and then it also had speakers. Horrible mistake for them, great mistake for me. And then when I was about 13, I was in a band, but I didn't play guitar. And so we had multiple singers. So when I wasn't singing, I was just like sitting off stage or sometimes like staying on stage. And my dad saw one of our performances. He's like, hey, like you need to learn how to play guitar. So he gave me his guitar. And ever since then, I've been playing guitar. I don't think I'm a fantastic guitar player. I'd call myself like a campfire guitarist. But I play to accompany myself and I really enjoy it. So I've been playing guitar for like 8 years now.
Nice.
That's awesome. And would you say that it actually like helps your vocals along now, being able to play guitar and sing at the same time too? Like,
oh, for sure. It definitely helps me, like, because I don't do, well, I've started recently singing lessons again, but while I wasn't doing them, it really helps me like stay on key and stuff. And then also it really helps with the nerves to just have like this physical barrier between you and the audience.
That's awesome.
And then so then what kind of propelled you to start this music blog?
So I've been writing since I was about 11. I wrote my first poem when I was 11 in one of my English classes for extra credit. And ever since then, I got a lot of encouragement from a teacher at that time. Even though the poem was horrible, it propelled me to continue writing and actually start to get good at it. And so when I moved to Ottawa, I didn't really know a lot of people. I knew my best friend from home. She goes to school here. And she ended up taking me to a concert with some of her classmates were performing. Her classmates are in a band called Noise Hotel. And I made the mistake of thinking that she knew the headlining band, which is No Hits. And in reality, she knew Noise Hotel. So I had listened to all of No Hits repertoire. I had prepped for the show to see them. And then after Noise Hotel plays, she goes, okay, like, if you want to stay for the other bands, we can. I was like, what do you mean your friends haven't played? And so we watched this No Hits show, and I fall in love with Noise Hotel and Frownline and No Hits and this whole community and the Rainbow. And I ended up submitting a small write-up to Capital Noise Zine. And it was my first time writing kind of more journalistic stuff. And I was like, wow, I actually really enjoy this, because in high school I didn't really like the journalistic style of writing. I thought it was frustrating because it was in high school, it was very like regimented. And so I was like, wow, I really want to do more of this. And so I looked around through different publications in Ottawa, and I couldn't really find anything that I think would let me write the way that I wanted to with the volume that I wanted to. So I decided to follow in the footsteps of one of my favorite writers, Rain Fisher Kwan. She has a Substack. It's a lot about feminism and pop culture. And so I decided to start a Substack, and I posted the first one. It was primarily about the new hires, and immediately, without even tagging them, one of the new hires saw it and picked it up and shared it, and it got a lot of reception very quickly, and that little bit of encouragement kept me writing.
That's awesome. And just for everyone listening as well, it's called Fan Behaviour blog,
Yeah, it's
correct?
called Fan Behaviour.
Yeah,
And where did you kind of come up with that name, or is it based on a certain concept or anything?
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Originally, the blog was called Doing Too Much because I had so many things in it that weren't music, and the blog still has things in it that aren't music. Like sometimes I'll write about venues, or I'll write about books. Usually, I've written about a podcast or two, but I was doing so much at the time, and that's why it was called Doing Too Much. But through it, I really noticed that a lot of the stuff I was talking about was things that I was a fan of. And I had used the term being on my fan behavior a little bit, which is a term that a lot of like fan communities use. And so I kind of co-opted that, spelled it in a Canadian way.
I've never heard of it, like fan behavior. It's interesting, yeah.
I think it's more like You can definitely see it in like K-pop communities, which I am not a part of, and I will not pretend that I know a lot about.
But it's like the heavy, I guess, like the heavy support fans, like the ones that
yeah.
are just like really invested is what is the overall idea.
Yeah, it's about kind of like that obsession or really big interest.
That's awesome.
Did you go to school for journalism or?
No, I'm actually still in my undergrad at the University of Waterloo. I study environmental studies.
Oh, no way.
And so I came to Ottawa on a co-op job because my school has a really big co-op program. So I came here for 10 months to do a job, went back to school for 4 months, and now I'm back again for a different job. Oh. And so after I graduate, I hope to move here.
When you say feminism, what does that look like for you? Like, what are maybe some key points to destigmatize it?
Yeah, sure. So, like, when I say that I'm a feminist, I say that I'm an intersectional feminist, which means that, like, I pay attention to other aspects of a person that have to do with their gender. So, the way that, like, gender and race intersects, like, a black woman would have a different experience with misogyny than a white woman would, because there are different aspects that affect the way that the world perceives them. And so feminism is not about making women higher than men. It's more about highlighting women's struggles and bringing about the idea that men are not the problem, but the patriarchy is, and how women are systematically oppressed, whether or not an individual woman experiences that. In Canada, women are oppressed, but in other countries, women are oppressed even more. And so that doesn't mean that there isn't any misogyny in Canada. It just means that it manifests in a different way.
Very true. Just at different levels and forms, sort of thing.
Yeah. For a really long time, I didn't really experience a lot of sexism. And then every once in a while, something will crop up. And especially in music, it is very male dominated, like a lot of industries. I felt very welcome for a very long time, but every once in a while, there's just something that happens. And I really don't want other women to have to experience that. And that's why I try and highlight the fact that, like, I am a feminist. I do try and highlight female artists, especially like looking around. There are a lot of female artists in the Ottawa music scene, but they're not as prevalent as a lot of the male artists are.
Fair enough. And it's very good to have that representation and do our best to create a community behind that, because it does really trickle down, especially from like Hollywood style, music scene and stuff like that. It's definitely like a format that they have that needs to kind of, be broken.
Yeah, I was talking to Luella recently, who's a Kingston-based artist, and I didn't even think of this until she brought it up, which was that there are few women who are performing, but there are even fewer women who are behind the booth, who are producing. And so she makes a really conscious effort to go out and learn from the people that she's working with and really be able to like run her own sessions and use all of the equipment so that she's not reliant on anybody else and that she can kind of slowly start to fill that gap that's there.
I've noticed that your Instagram, the Fan Behaviour one, is pretty like awesome the way that you format your posts. I don't know what you're using. So what tools do you use to manage that, and how did you develop those?
So I used to have a job as a social media coordinator for a branch of Habitat for Humanity.
Which is non-for-profit?
It's a not-for-profit, yeah.
Okay.
So at one point I managed 17 social media accounts because they had a bunch of like sub branches that had their own Facebook accounts. So it got very messy after a while. But that was just for one section of Ontario. I don't want it to seem that I'm doing it for the whole entire like global corporation.
Yeah.
But I did that for a while and I really loved it. And I'm what some people would call a digital native. I was born into the internet. I was born in 2001, so I know a lot about social media. I was very chronically online for a while, and I just kind of learned what people like and what I like. And so through my job for social media, through a little bit of volunteering for social media, I got really good at this program called Canva. But Canva is not what I actually use for fan behavior. Substack actually gives you media assets for your posts. So using the font that I chose for the blog, a couple photos that I chose for each specific blog post, and the title of the blog post, Substack brings that all together. So it gives you a really nice, perfect like Instagram image. And so they do that for you. So that was not my design, but all of my story posts and stuff, and a lot of the stuff that I do on my personal account is all through Canva, because it's such a good program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we use Canva.
Yeah.
Yeah, we pay for the pro version or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
it really helps.
I miss the pro version. I used to have it for work, but I don't now.
It has a lot of cool tools.
And I even say just the technique you use behind like the titling, and then like you give sort of a phrase that leads towards what the post is about or whatever, and then it expands on it within the actual like sort of body of it. And it's like that's another thing that I find is really creative in the sense that like it draws people in to it, because that's why it actually had me like reading further in each one kind of thing.
Nice.
And then so do you have a Facebook as well, like a Facebook page, or?
I'm slowly starting to force myself to use Facebook, because I understand that it is a really big community for people, but I never used Facebook growing up, so it feels a little bit foreign to me. I have experience with it through like Facebook business accounts through my last job, but I don't use it a lot. I'll occasionally post fan behavior stuff to my Facebook. But I did force myself to make a Fan Behaviour Facebook page, and I will start putting stuff on it. It's one of my goals for this year, because a lot of like musicians use Facebook to organize, and I think it's a really great tool, but I don't even have Facebook on my phone, to be honest.
If I'm being honest as well, a couple years ago I got rid of it, and like I just that one day like I deleted it, and then they were like, "Oh, you're not going to get your stuff after 30 days or whatever," and I just kind of forgot about it after a while. Like just really had to kind of hone in on the idea of it. But you're right, because I find what gives Facebook a leg up is that kind of whole event concept, like the actual creation of an event, have people interested, things like that. Like that's one thing Instagram and stuff like lacks. Is just that kind of, you can go and actually see what kind of almost like audience is going to be there. And I don't know. I feel like that's what,
true.
Yeah. So that's a good feature. But.
So you said that you had experience with Facebook. Have you ever done like advertising, like run like ads and stuff like that through Facebook business suite or whatever it's called?
Yeah, we did that for a little bit.
It's a little complex.
I can't remember what one it was. I think it was for a national competition that was for writing for children. And so we ran a couple of boosted posts on Instagram and Facebook for that. I want to look to do that for Fan Behaviour soon.
Sweet.
But I have to find like the right thing to validate spending the money on it.
Yeah, that's fair. And then you also said, so you're going to university and you work full time, from what I understand.
Yes.
And then on top of that, you're doing a blog. So how do you time manage all these three things?
Very, very difficultly. So I normally, right now, because I'm working, I don't have a full course load. So I'm taking one class right now. It's a philosophy class, which is a lot more work than I thought it would be. So I go to work, and if I have downtime, occasionally I will be able to do my philosophy class at lunch. And so I'll go to work. I work from home, which is really nice most of the time, because I work for the government. And then I'll normally have dinner and try and do some blog post stuff. Occasionally, if I go for a walk, I'll like speak to my phone all my ideas about my blog posts, because that's where I find that I have the best ideas. And then at night, I'm often at shows, especially on the weekend. I'll try and do a lot more blog post writing on the weekend. But most of the marketing stuff and the planning stuff for Fan Behaviour happens on the weekdays.
Sweet.
And what does the process look like? I mean, how do you get inspired, and then what's your writing process? You must obviously get writer's block. I mean, I get writer's block. I'm not a writer like you, but I write lyrics.
Yeah.
So what's the process? Do you have any tools maybe you could share with somebody or with us to debunk?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me in my writer's block is forcing myself to write. And the way that I do that is I now have an editor. She's my friend from home. Her name's Maggie. She's amazing. She catches all my typos. She tells me off when I go onto these weird tangents. So Maggie kind of keeps me accountable, because I have to give her something to edit so that it can come out. I can't just randomly post something on a day. I have to have enough pre-planning to have something to give to her, especially because she is a full-time student and she has a part-time job and she has all this other stuff going on. She needs warning before stuff comes out. I also have deadlines because I have a subscriber tier on my Substack, so people can pay between $2.50 to $5 a month to have access to bonus content, and by the end of the month, I have to give them that blog post. It's not like I'm oh, I have to give my editor a blog post. It's I have a financial obligation to these people to give them some content. So having those kind of deadlines helps with the procrastination, but there are still 30 other days in the month where I can procrastinate through it. For me, I just try and write everything as soon as possible because the longer it goes on, I'm writing about an event currently. I wrote a little bit before I came here that happened probably, I think it was last weekend. And since then, I've forgotten things and I don't have the motivation to do it because I'm not as inspired about it. So my biggest advice would be to just write when you have the idea, write when you are thinking about the thing, even if it's writing in your phone. There's a quote and it's like the best camera there is the one that you have on you. The best like time to write is like when you just have something to write about.
Oh, that's great.
Talking about cameras, are you a photographer?
No, I'm looking at maybe getting a camera because my phone is not doing artist justice anymore. I like to take photos, and I take all the photos for my blog, and I take all the photos for the zines that I make. But I wouldn't call myself a photographer.
Oh, okay. And like, have you obviously like with Jack and stuff? Have you collaborated with Neighborhood Noise in terms of writing?
We've never collaborated with Neighborhood Noise.
Interesting.
I don't think that that's something we've really spoken about, but Jack and I have talked about like doing photography and writing projects, like music projects. He's offered to do some production on songs that I've written.
Sweet.
But I don't think that Neighborhood Noise and Fan Behaviour have really like concretely had an idea that would make sense for us to collaborate on.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. You got to strike when the idea hits, you know. And one thing I was going to ask, I saw like a post you did about, it was entitled The Love Letter to Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And I was just like wondering like the whole idea behind that and what kind of like, I guess, gave you the idea to do that in the first place. And is it related to the music scene and how you kind of got into, you know, the community here and everything?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that was actually, all of that was written and almost finished about like a month before I went to my first show in Ottawa. So it was completely disconnected from the music scene. I purely fell in love with the city through mostly like lockdown and pandemic times where I was just walking around, seeing little stores, going and exploring like all the nature spaces, meeting friends through small gatherings. And I just really fell in love with the city and walking around in the kind of freedom it gave me. At that point, I really felt I had outgrown Waterloo. Waterloo is a very small city, and coming to this bigger city that wasn't massive and still kind of felt homey was really nice. And so A Love Letter to Ottawa is a physical zine that I made. It's a collection of about 16 photos and 14 poems, I think. And so I sold just under 50 of them because I made 50 and I kept a couple for gifts and I kept a copy for myself. But it's just about a bunch of different things I saw in Ottawa and how the city made me feel. And I really liked it. And so hopefully I'll be putting another similar zine out soon. I have a bunch of poem drafts and about 100 potential photos that I've squared away. So I just have to weasel it down to a more manageable number.
man, that's awesome. And that's actually a great way to look at the whole pandemic situation in the first place, and the fact that you could find kind of beauty in a shitty situation, if you, you know, for lack of a better word. And would you say that maybe like kept you going throughout the pandemic time and like kind of like inspired to kind of like, you know, get back to things as normal eventually, but it kind of made you appreciate what you had there and everything? Like,
For sure. I really like cherished the time that I got to spend on that project, being able to, at the time I was working in a lab, so I was getting to go like outside my house and do stuff because it was critical work as opposed to regular work. That's a like government definition. But I was able to like go outside my house and like see a couple people at work and then come home and like work on this passion project. And so it was really nice to have that thing that I was able to do. And then when it was done, I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? But at that time, when it was finished, it was springtime. I could do more things outside. Things were opening up. And so it was a really like perfect, the time that it came out was almost perfect.
You mentioned earlier that when you do blog, it's mostly about music, but it's not only about music. Mm-hmm. And so having experience in social media, do you think, is there a significant importance in niching, like finding a niche? Because we've kind of had that like that kind of situation where at first we're like, oh, we should just talk about anything. So we've had people come on and talk about their business and all that stuff like that. Then later on, we were like, maybe we should just niche down and for the podcast specifically, and we should just do, music related content. You know what I mean? And then at the end of it all, we're like, screw it. Let's just podcast about anything with whoever, So I think that's, and whatever, if it reaches if it screws us later on, then so be it, I don't know. So what would be your opinion in having a niche?
I think I've had the same like internal battle that you guys have had of like, I really like all of these things and I want to talk about all of these things and I want to showcase it all, but I can't. And so I have debated getting rid of the book section. It's kind of the longest whole, like the book section of Fan Behaviour at like near the end, like a third of the way or 2/3 of the way through, I normally start to talk about a book. Like last month I did Patti Smith's Just Kids, which is a music-ish related book. But I will write about a book, and I was debating for a really long time whether or not I should get rid of it. And some of my closest friends were like, respectfully, Emma, like I don't read the blog post for the music. I read the blog post for the book section. And then my music friends were like, well, I obviously read the blog post for the music stuff. So I decided to keep it because I really like doing it. And I debated whether or not that fit within the brand of Fan Behaviour. It fit within the niche. But I think with Fan Behaviour, I've specifically carved out a niche of like, this is stuff you should be excited about. This is stuff that I'm not writing about it to be a music writer. I'm writing about it so that fans get access to the content that they want. And so ideally, I'm going to slowly start to move the book section to be more about local writers and writers that are more of a human being or more of a person as opposed to like the icon Patti Smith kind of thing. And so I would want it, the goal behind Fan Behaviour is to give fans access to the content that they want and be able to become fans about these people who are local musicians, local writers.
Would you even say that like that would eventually lead to like personally interviewing people like that, like almost like interviewing a writer directly and then writing your interview out sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. I think I would really enjoy doing that. I've done a couple interviews so far. I did one with Noise Hotel, one with Luella, and one with Fifth, and they were all really enjoyable, but I'm very new to it, so I always get a little nervous just to ask people to interview them.
Mm-hmm. No, it's something that you could work on and develop, moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
And I have one. It's not a local writer, unfortunately, but I have one good book suggestion if you haven't done it already.
Mm-hmm.
This is Your Brain on Music, and it's actually like I don't know. Have you ever heard of that one before?
I don't think so.
It's like all
pretty
about
complex
kind of
book.
the, yeah.
I remember reading it when I was younger.
Yeah.
And it was just like I was like halfway through it and I was like having a hard time.
Oh yeah, it's a lot
it's
of
pretty. It's
kind
like
of big words, but but it's like it's based on like the psychology behind music and just kind of like how people's like senses are connected to it and stuff like that. And it's just it's cool. It kind of goes.
I have the book here.
Okay,
yeah, I can show it to you after.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, I have a lot of experience with biology because it's my minor,
cool.
and my previous role I was a microbial genomics research assistant. So,
Which is what?
Microbes are like bacteria. Genomics, so your genome is your entire like set of like genetic information, and so microbial genomics is the study of the genome of bacteria.
Okay.
Essentially.
So the genetics behind bacteria.
Yeah, so it's like
exists.
but it's all of it at once, not just like a specific like gene that would like make your eyes blue. It would be like everything at once.
Oh wow!
So
that's awesome.
It was very, very interesting, but it's definitely not my end goal. And I really cherish that time, but it's not my end goal. So I think that book would be really interesting and would be something that like I can definitely see myself reviewing that book.
Sweet.
That's awesome.
Well, I was gonna say, like, do you have any plans upcoming for Fan Behaviour that you're specifically looking forward to, or maybe something you're covering, or something you hope to cover perhaps in the next little bit?
Yeah, well, right now I'm writing about a show that Caspian did at House of Targ. It was my first show at House of Targ, so I'm excited to write about that. I'm writing about a music video showcase, and then I have a couple shows this month that I have planned out that. I'm going to write about this show and this show, but like not these ones or maybe these ones. I never go to a show with the idea of I'm not going to write about this. I'm probably not, but if something happens, obviously write about it. My goal is to show people unique, interesting experiences. So if a band approaches me being like, do you want to come to a music video shoot? Do you want to come to this event? I'm really interested in getting those behind the scenes and, again, unique experiences for fans. And so personally, for Fan Behaviour, we have an event upcoming that I'm excited to write about the behind the scenes of putting it together. We're doing a 1-year anniversary party for Fan Behaviour at Bar Robo on April 29th.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we're going to have 3 bands play. We're going to play a bunch of music videos as part of a showcase. So I have a couple lined up already. Bands that either have had their music video out for a little bit or are going to be putting out their music video in the next 2 months. We're going to showcase their music videos between the sets of the bands who are performing. And right now, who's performing, we have as the headliner, the New Hires, No Hits, and Just Fine is opening.
Just
that's
Fine,
a
yeah.
good
So
lineup.
Just Fine. Yeah, we went to high school with
really?
with Celine. Yeah, like
Awesome.
we know her like pretty well.
Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's so lovely.
Yeah, yeah, she's awesome.
Amazing
Yeah.
bands too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. One of them actually was it Guest Room? I'm not sure if you mentioned that, but it had like a really cool like party music video recently. I don't know. You might not even be aware of it. It's just somebody showed it to me in passing, but it was actually like one of the bands. I'm just trying to remember which.
Are you talking about Neon Ghost House?
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry,
Yes.
it wasn't Young.
Yeah,
I knew I
saw
was
the
saying it
video.
wrong.
That was a dope video. I was
Yes.
actually really impressed.
Yes. I'm very briefly in that music video.
No way.
I like watched it over and over and over again to try and find myself because I'm in a couple of the crowd shots. But yeah, that was really great. I wrote a really long blog post about the filming of that music video and what it was like and sleeping in my car afterwards because we were just like out in the middle of nowhere. But it was really cool. It was really great. They did such a good job. And it was so interesting to see like the camera operators run around and get all these shots and be like, I wonder how this is going to look.
Yeah.
And I think the same company also did Fifth's recent music video. And
Oh, sweet.
Both videos look phenomenal. Like that company is really good.
What is the company again? Sorry.
I'm so blanking right now. I feel really
Oh
embarrassed.
no, it's all good.
I can like picture the logo, but I cannot remember.
Oh
their
yeah,
name.
no, we'll do some research afterwards. And actually, speaking of music video, it's funny that you say that. So, because I think I actually talked to somebody about this too. Like the actual shooting of it had to be done probably a couple times, like the song all the way through, like a few different times to actually get different angles and stuff. So way back, actually, there was a band that we knew from Elmer called Les Mosquitos, and they were like a reggae ska kind of like French band,
dope,
and they were so sick. And they had this one song that we actually did a house party like in the backyard. But yeah, what would you say is like the experience of kind of like having to get almost like in that mindset each time they were shooting it every time? Like, do you have to kind of like pump yourself up, or like was it just sort of natural each time? Like,
it was pretty natural because the idea for the night was it was a show, and so they played the Expectations, the song the music video was about 3 times, but the rest of the night was other songs. So it wasn't like we were subjected to listen to the same song back to back to back, but it was kind of interspersed. And it was the song that by the end of the night, even if you didn't know the words, you knew most of them. So you were still able to enjoy the song and get along with it. Also, it really helps that a lot of the people who were there were close friends of the band or like very close secondary friends of the band. So people were really excited to support their friends. People were excited to get on camera. And so it also helped that it was a party, so people were drinking. And so the whole night had like really great energy. And even after the kind of show happened, the band went into a shed to film some like extra shots with like lights and kind of like a different setup, but the rest of us continued to party, and a lot of people actually like either had tents. Very few people slept in their car, but there were people who like tented the night out underneath like a bunch of trees. So people were there for the night.
Sick. And I appreciate you sharing that behind the scenes because it's just cool to hear the story of it based on the fact that that's the feeling I got from watching it. You could feel that the energy was really high the whole time, and it was just like you could kind of get that through the video. So it's just always cool to actually hear like the construct behind it and how it actually led to it. So keeping like everyone entertained by just going through with the show is actually such a smart idea for like making it.
Yeah.
What is like? So what do you think fan behavior is going? Or like, what are your aspirations in that realm?
That's a good question. I have a bunch of goals for the year, and most of them are pretty small. But I'd really like fan behavior to continue for a long time, hopefully. I want to keep writing, and I want to keep showcasing bands. I haven't posted this yet, but I have bought some very cheap podcast mics because
That's
I was egged on by a friend who was like, I want to be on the Fan Behavior podcast. I was like, okay, well, I will buy some podcast mics. And so hopefully start to podcast, start to put out more stuff about local musicians, do more events. I've really enjoyed planning this, and I think it'll be really fun in the long term. I just want to do more stuff to highlight the really interesting and not private, but like personal experiences of being in a band. I was talking the other day, and have you guys seen the movie Almost Famous?
Yes, I love that movie.
I can't recall.
It's about a very young, like high school journalist who convinces a magazine to pay for him to go on tour with this up and coming band. And he just details and chronicles the wild experiences that he, as a 14 or 16-year-old boy, has with these adults on tour.
Yeah.
And I jokingly said to a friend recently, like, that's the goal. I would love to go on tour with a band and chronicle their journey. So that's Fan Behavior's like big goal right now.
That's sweet.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's crazy.
You'd remember that movie if I showed you. Yeah.
I can't. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's with the band's called Stillwater, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got his friend Penny Lane, and then they become friends, and they're like hanging with the band and just traveling around and like. Yeah, that's such an amazing, and that's a great aspiration too. Mm-hmm. Like it would just be such a fun experience, and that's where you can really separate. Like you're doing your work and you're doing something that you would consider work, but it's like it's such a passion of yours that it would just be like the be all end all of experiences either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like when I was growing up, I would sit in my bed when like Warped Tour season came around and just watch every single video that came out of like Warped Tour from bands and from people who are reviewing shows and stuff. And I want to be able to do that for musicians here, whether that be getting people to see the stuff that they're putting out, because Ottawa is full of so many amazing musicians like yourselves, or whether it be like for people who are genuine fans of these bands already being like, they're not putting out music yet, like I want more, like I need something to like tide me over until their next song release. So it would just be like creating that fan culture in Ottawa.
I'm not aware of any other I don't know if this would be the correct word, but competitors. Is there do you see it as competition? Well, not in actual competition, but you know what I mean. Other people who are doing the same kind of thing that you are. Or I'm not aware of any.
I think right now there isn't really anyone that I can see that are doing something super similar. There's obviously Neighborhood Noise and Capital Noise who are putting out music-based content, but it's a very different style, and we all cover very different things. And so I don't feel that there's any competition. We all have our own niches. I will be inviting Neighborhood Noise to the Fan Behavior event so that they can cover it. And I think that right now it's a really great community in Ottawa, but there honestly isn't a lot of competition in general. And I hope it stays that way. But I know as things get bigger, there will be more people who are interested in doing similar things. And so the community might change a little bit as that happens.
Yeah. They're going to try to hop on the train, but it's important. It's important for us to engage it, right? And start,
Yeah. At least you'll be like the OG.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that you just when you consider, I guess, not the word niche, but just something that you do specifically is that focusing on the fans. Like that's really important, because that is something too that I've always found with music and musicians in general that I've always loved is the connection behind it, or the humanizing aspect. So it's like seeing the behind the scenes and getting like a real feel of these people. It's like no matter where fame takes them or where they go, it's always going to be that that same sort of like. The vibe, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I've definitely talked to some of my musician friends and they've been like, yeah, like there are these people at the show and I've never met them before, but they know all the words to the song and they were like talking about all this stuff. And I don't even know who these people are and they don't know like any of my friends. Like they are just genuinely fans. Like this is such a strange experience. This is so cool. Like this is what I've dreamed of forever. And so I want to give those fans the opportunity to like get the content that they want and learn more about the musicians that they care about so much.
And if you start podcasting, what do you think that will look like? Are you going to be like interviewing people, or are you just going to be like doing a podcast solo, and then will you do video, or is it just going to be audio?
I haven't truly decided yet. I've been like fiddling around with it because if I do a podcast, I don't want it to be the same as the blog. I don't want it to just be simple show reviews. Well, not simple, but I don't want it to mimic the blog. I want it to be its own thing. It'll still be under Fan Behavior, but it has to be something that's different and it has to be something that fills its own niche. And so I've been debating with what the best way to cover Ottawa music is. And I think it'd be really interesting to match up different people from the Ottawa music scene to have a conversation that might not normally be able to interact in like a public way, whether that be putting a promoter and a musician together or throwing my editor up to talk with a musician and kind of have that interaction, because my editor, as much as she does attend shows with me and she reads everything that I write, for better or for worse, she isn't necessarily like a member of the Ottawa music scene. So it's interesting to have that outside perspective. And so I'd like to kind of see that contrast and be able to do that. But I still haven't decided yet. I've bought the mics as more of a way to get myself to start working on the project.
That's a great way to do it.
That's brilliant. That's a great idea. Yeah. I would have never thought of something like that.
And speaking of just April 29th being like the year anniversary, you said, right, for Fan Behavior, what would you say like maybe you're most proud of, or just like some like things that you started with and then kind of where you've led to now and going on a year that you've seen the most growth, or maybe like something that you're just like happy that you accomplished along the way? What would you say is the dynamic between the year?
I think for me, like the biggest, I don't want to say ego boost, maybe like boost in confidence was Bane Zine invited me to a house show. And I got to the house show and one of my friends told me like, hey, like one of my friends, like this other guy was like, I've been in the music scene for years and I barely got invited here, and like she just shows up and she's here. And so it was like this person and I know each other and we're friends, but it was just really a big confidence boost that people cared about what I was doing to invite me to this private event with no expectation that I would write about it, just so that I would be there and be able to experience the community. I think for me, I write about this all the time, the best part of the music scene is the community and people that care about each other and support each other, but also get really excited at each other's shows. So going to that first Basement show and being able to just feel so welcome there, even though I honestly really knew 3 people, was so wonderful and such like a landmark for me. I also really always appreciate when bands invite me to things, whether it be to shows or to special events like the Neon Ghost House music video. That was phenomenal, and I'm so excited I got to write about it. Because once again, I was not invited under the expectation that I would write about it. I was invited just to be there. And also interviewing has been great. I've always been nervous to do that because what if I don't ask the right question? What if I don't get enough stuff? What if I don't write it down fast enough? And so being able to do 3 interviews in a year, one of them was actually like a impromptu backstage interview, and have them all go really well, has been really great.
That's awesome. And, you know, I can really attest to that, like having a sound tech perspective at Live on Elgin. A lot for, you know, Neon Ghost House, new hires, guest room status, like no hits, all of them, is really seeing like, it's like when one's band is playing, the other bands are there, you know, in the audience cheering them on, just like hanging out. And so it's like I'm always seeing the same faces a lot of the time. And you always see like another, you know, large chunk of audience as well. But it just really does show that community support, going back on what you said about that. Like, it's so cool to see that. And it's always just like a mutual support. And it's like, but it's actually creating a lot of success. Like, especially with a lot of the posts I see that you guys doing, like all these bands, like it is actually creating that kind of more broader, I guess, worldview on, not worldview, but, you know, see people taking notice on Ottawa and the music scene that we have. And I think it's really cool that we can kind of all create that together, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think Ottawa, I mean, is an interesting place. in terms of music. You know, not that I'm talking shit or anything about Ottawa. I like Ottawa. I mean, you know, I'm here. But yeah, there's definitely like, you know, they say like, oh, Ottawa's dead. Everyone goes to sleep. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
Yeah.
You know, everybody goes to bed at like 8 or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But then obviously it's like, yeah, we're not Toronto and we're not Montreal, but you know, I see a lot of like professional artists and it's like tours, you know, it's like Hamilton, Toronto, Montreal, not Ottawa, Vancouver, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Ottawa's just not there, so it's I hope that we can get it on the map, you know what I mean?
For sure. I think, I can't remember who said it to me. I really wish I did because I've quoted them twice now. And they said to me that Ottawa feels like what Toronto used to be in terms of music, like 20, 30 years ago maybe. And so it just constantly feels like this building and building and building, especially with recent shows I've been going to. I don't know if you guys were at the New Hires, No Hits, Noise Hotel Salmonella show at the Rainbow. It was sold out and the crowd was crazy. It was really, really good and people were really excited. And there were, like, I go to a lot of shows. There was one month where I wrote about 13 bands because I'd gone to so many shows and I just couldn't pick one. And there were so many people there that I had never seen before in my life. Like, you could have...
That's amazing.
Like, these couldn't... Like, to me, you could have just chosen, like, a group of random people. I'd be like, I have no idea who these are. But at the same time, I still knew so many people who were there. And so Ottawa, I think, is working towards something, like, really, really big. And I think right now is almost the perfect time to start something because it's still... if you mess up, no one's gonna get mad at you. If you mess up, nothing is gonna be like plastered on the sides of buildings. It's a very comfortable spot to be right now.
I agree.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
To be honest, that's a lot of what motivated us to do this.
Yeah, podcast.
And
You know, why not?
You're right. Like when we even started, like there's been times where I've reflected on it and been like, oh, like I didn't even like the way I spoke in that one or things like that, whatever. But like you said, no one's really judging you at the end of the day, and there's nothing. So we just got to, you know, keep hustling at it, and it's like you said, it'll create a foundation that will eventually like have us shine, just from the hard work that everyone here in the community does. But it's like there's no fault in fucking up along the way, you know. Like,
I mean, at the end of the day, who fucking cares? Like, you know what I mean? We're like,
yeah.
maybe we're like not
I
as.
do think we have tons of potential. Like,
But I mean, we're not like, in a sense, like when I say like, you know, we podcast, we just free flow because I find that improvisation is what I do on guitar, right, or music in general, right. So I'd like to kind of like just add that aspect into like talking, right. And so I guess it probably would be like I could imagine that you would probably like be way more organized if you were to start a podcast.
I'd be a little more regimented, but I would hope to have like the same kind of energy as you guys in terms of people who talk on your podcast don't look like they're stressed out of their mind, like trying to get their bullet points in, or I don't want it to feel like a radio interview where if you mess up, there's a problem. Every time I give, I do an interview, I try and record it. And I always say, if you mess up, just stop and restart. Like, it doesn't matter. No one is gonna like put stuff out that you don't want to be out. I remember I was doing an interview for someone and it looked like one of the band members was nervous, and one of his band members said, hey, like, don't worry about it. Like, this is Emma. Like, she's not going to make you look like a fool. And so I was like, I'm really glad that people know that they can trust me with their words and know that I won't misrepresent them.
That's great. Yeah, and same on our end. I love that. And it's cool because like a lot of the times, like you don't even realize, even when you're listening to other content or other people's things that you like listen to, even whether it's local or not, it's just like so many times people are talking and they're stumbling over their words anyway, or they're like repeating something, you know, but you don't even like hone in on it, you know. When you're on the other side of it, I guess you're trying to be like perfecting your craft, so you're always like, you know, got this like tiptoe around it. But yeah, I listen and I'm like, that's just genuinely people talking. You know, we speak like that. It's not a big deal, you know. It's, if anything, it makes people more comfortable listening to someone who's just like talking normally.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
But it's hard to get in that headspace, so.
Yeah.
It's hard to get out of headspace too sometimes.
Yeah, out of it, yeah.
One of the questions that I ask pretty much everybody is, what does the future look like for Emma? And secondary would be, what tips that, you know, tools that you could give to somebody who's listening that might like writing or wants to start doing this. What advice would you give?
Yeah, so the future for me is I have my job right now. It'll end in April, and I'm giving myself some time off in the summer to just write, to just make zines and do blog posts and try and do as much as I can for Fan Behaviour before I have to go do my last year of school. So I will temporarily be out of Ottawa. My partner lives here, so I will be coming back for probably like a week every month, hopefully. But I'll go back to school, get my degree finally, and then hopefully move back to Ottawa and keep writing. Potentially get my master's. I'm looking at a master's of literature in environmental culture and communication, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I have to finish my bachelor's first. And then for anyone who is looking to get into writing or looking to get into the Ottawa music scene, my biggest recommendation is always just start. And I know that that's honestly like not the greatest advice. It's so nerve-wracking to go to a show by yourself. It's so stressful to put something out there and not know what people are going to do. But I always think there's someone out there who has the confidence to do that thing. Why do they get the confidence and you don't, right? Every time I put something out or I DM someone, like when I was DMing you guys and being like, hey, like, do you want to have a chat? I was like, you know what? There's someone out there that also wants to do this and they're going to DM Cabin in the Clearing too. Why can't I have the same confidence? I'm not going to make a fool of myself. No one is going to think poorly of me because I am being like courageous and like taking a step out of my comfort zone. So the best thing to do is to just start to see a poster and go to a show, to write your first review, whether that be a Google review of a venue, something you put on your Instagram story, or you just start a Substack and you write a little review, or even just start a Substack and like make the title of what your blog is going to be. The first step is like definitely the hardest.
Yeah, that's I 100% agree. That's what we advocate all the time, is just to like actually start. And what's ironic, I'll just say this about that, is that we weren't even a podcast to begin with. We weren't a podcast.
What were you guys?
What were we before? We actually worked on Cabin in the Clearing for almost like a full year before we even started sending out invites on like our Facebook pages. Like we created the Facebook page and we created the Instagram, and it was just like a ghost. It was non-existent. Yeah, for almost a full year. And then and then we just like originally we did create a content, like a plan, like a plan. But and I think it was to do where we were gonna do interviews at first. Just like interview people, and then
because like figure it out along the way, you know. Yeah,
figure it along the way. So that is the testament of time, so to speak, for us, because we had no idea what the fuck we were doing, and it turned into a podcast. And well, now we are interviewing people, but it's also a podcast at the same time. So, for anybody who's listening, just fucking do it.
Yeah, and take that advice, because honestly, super grateful you did reach out and just like this. Thank you for coming on. This is a kick-ass interview, and we'll definitely do it again soon. Like we always say that, we would love to have you again. Like we, just keep grinding on it.
6 months or a year, come back and
for sure.
talk
I'd
about
love
the progress that you've done.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
And maybe you guys will be on the Fan Behaviour podcast.
Would love that. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Okay, bye. That'll be muted by that.